Now we start with the crisis in the Central Africa. Hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced and many have been killed, including women and children, in fighting between the Congolese army and the M23 rebels. Now, regional and international efforts to end the conflict have so far failed. So why has this decade-long conflict suddenly become so much worse? Now, for years, the M23 rebels have been fighting Congolese troops in eastern DRC. The rebels claim they are protecting the interest of the Congolese Tutsi, who are facing violence from local armed groups. Now, they accuse the Congolese government of not living up to a peace deal that would have fully integrated the Tutsis into the army and administration. A peace deal was signed on March 23rd in 2009 between the DRC government and the rebel group CNDP, but it was doomed. Frustrated by the lack of support from the Tutsi ethnic group, the M23 rebels, named after the date when the deal was signed, began to mobilize. By 2021, the M23 had taken over large parts of eastern DRC. Like many rebel groups, the M23 have benefited from the illegal trade of minerals. They cashed in on natural resources such as the highly valued coltan necessary for cell phone and laptop batteries, tin and gold, all found in eastern DRC. The UN estimates M23 rebels are generating around $300,000 a month in revenue in seized mining areas. Now, it's long been alleged that the M23 rebels are also supported by Rwanda. Of course, Rwanda is still raw from the genocide in 1994 when Tutsis were massacred by Hutus. Mediation talks aimed at de-escalating tensions between DRC and Rwanda began in June 2022 in Angola under the leadership of Angolan president. But in 2024, the so-called Luanda peace process was called off after Rwandan President Paul Kagame failed to attend. He has insisted that the DRC recognizes the M23 and include them in the peace talks. On January 4th of this year, the M23 rebels seized Masisi, a town in North Kivu, eastern DRC. Now, the rebels then made further advances and captured Kahele on January 19th and Minova on January 21st. 2 days later, the rebels seized Sake town, a major route into Goma city. A day later, on January 24th, the M23 claimed they had gained control of the DRC's second largest city, Goma. Now, reports soon came through that women and children had been brutalized and murdered. Also among the dead were United Nations peacekeepers. According to government figures, now more than 500,000 people have been displaced in January, many of whom have tried to flee over the border into Rwanda. Now, tensions between the DRC and Rwanda have rarely been this high.
Rwanda's defense forces, in support of their M23 puppet, are continuing their terrorist enterprise on our territory, sowing terror and desolation among our populations. I share your pain and indignation at these barbaric attacks. These acts are not only an attack on the Republic, but an affront to the history and dignity of our people. In these difficult times, I call on you to be resilient and, above all, to resist.
M23 are not Rwandans, please. These are Congolese, and one time he accepts it, then another time he says no, part of it is yes, and then the other part is from Rwanda, and these are he keeps on going. And how do we, leaders of our own countries, accept this to go on forever and just accept that we shall be manipulated by Tshisekedi or whoever is supporting him?
Now let's hear more from Daniel Van Dalen. He's a senior analyst from Great Lakes and DRC at Signal Risk. He joins me from Cape Town, South Africa. Thank you for joining us here on Africa Matters. Now, this is a desperate situation. Is there any hope that these two sides can even begin to enter peace talks?
Yeah, it's a very tough situation at the moment. We've seen a lot of strong words from President Felix Tshisekedi and Paul Kagame of Rwanda in the past 24 hours. We've seen Felix Tshisekedi basically state that, we're now mobilizing military to take back areas that were seized by M23. You also have Paul Kagame criticizing South Africa, for example, and threatening them in a sense. So I think there's been a bit of a war of the words in the past couple of days. So tensions are obviously high. I think there's a lot of international pressure happening at the moment. We saw a meeting with the EAC yesterday that were calling for direct dialogue. We have also seen that both Tshisekedi and Kagame are open to some sort of dialogue and a ceasefire. Just how we get there at the moment, I think, will be a bit of a long and potentially complicated process, given, as you've said, emotions are running high. You have two countries that have complete, opposing positions on how they plan to get to a dialogue. But I think it's positive, the fact that both are open to it. I think, unfortunately, we will just need a bit more international pressure on both sides to get them to the negotiating table, especially in terms of Rwanda.
So if I may ask you, who do you see can play an interlocutor here? Because we're talking about maybe perhaps the international negotiator.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because you have the EAC, which is very much for this dialogue between the Congolese government and M23. However, the Congolese government doesn't necessarily trust the EAC, because they kind of know that we've seen it with the intervention force that the EAC had in the DRC for a while. They refused to kind of act, even though there was evidence of Rwanda being there. M23 broke successive ceasefire agreements, but the EAC still refused to act. I think Tshisekedi's failure to attend the EAC emergency summit yesterday was quite telling on exactly who he views as an ally at this point, and it's not necessarily his partners in the EAC. He went to Angola's president, João Lourenço, and chatted to him, obviously in a bid to restart the Luanda process. But concurrently, you have Paul Kagame obviously not trusting SADC either. So, again, the war of the words between Kagame and South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa yesterday really heated up. So you have kind of two regional blocs that are probably going to play key mediating roles in this, but you have two countries that view the respective regional blocs as adversaries at this point. So on a regional level, I think you're going to find a very difficult time to have a mediator that both sides will trust. I think Angola is probably still in the best position in that sense. Obviously the West is not necessarily viewed favorably by either. So I think there will be a big challenge to find someone that will be able to bring them together that both sides trust. So this is why I said earlier, it's going to be a long and a bit complicated road before you manage to bring them down, because there's a lot of distrust at the moment. Right. And temperatures definitely need to cool down before things can progress.
And as you're talking about temperatures need to cool down as things progress, let's just have a look at what Vincent Karega, Rwanda's ambassador at the large for the Great Lakes region. And this is what he had to say. He told member states of the UNSC, he said, let me just quote him. This is what he said. Rebels will continue into South Kivu because Goma cannot be an end on its own unless in between they get good dialogue and negotiations with the government in Kinshasa, which he doubts. So which begs the question, could the conflict spread and spark regional and ethnic war?
I don't think so. I think, again, there's a lot of tensions are high. There's a lot of emotions. A lot of actors are saying a lot of things as they kind of receive threats, and they're retorting to these things. There's a lot of focus on avoiding a regional and ethnic war on all sides. You can see it. Like I said, at the moment, it's very much all rhetoric. Even Paul Kagame's statements to South Africa, what does a war look like between Rwanda and South Africa between thousands of kilometers? I highly doubt it. SADC, the EAC, everyone will do their absolute best to avoid a scenario of a repeat of the Congo wars and things like that. The Congo wars were obviously set also in a very specific time and place. There was motivation for Uganda and the Burundi, for example, to be involved, for Angola to be involved, where now there's those interests are not necessarily there anymore. Where now I think the diplomatic sphere is going to be the focus going forward, and to prevent that completely. And I think any escalation, especially when it comes to the involvement of outside actors, will be tempered quite quickly.
So now, from what you're saying then, so what should be the short and long-term measures that can be taken to stabilize Goma and prevent fresh conflict?
I think the first thing is, at the moment, yes, Rwanda is saying that, well, we need to do dialogue, but I think the advance needs to stop in South Kivu. There needs to be a bit of give and take as well. You can't be demanding dialogue, but then continuing your aggressive actions either. So I think that would be step one, and, an agreement to an actual ceasefire where, armed conflict does in fact stop. which will allow the temperature in the room to cool down a little bit. I think that would be step one. Tshisekedi, unfortunately, in the Congo will have to cede to requests for some sort of dialogue. That does appear to be a line in the sand for M23 and Rwanda. So there's going to have to be a bit of push and give and take in that sense. Rwanda is also going to have to concede to certain concessions, such like withdrawing its troops from the DRC. These are all things that need to happen before we can even get close to some sort of longer-term solution. However, like I said, at the moment, temperatures are running high and neither side is willing to concede. So this is where I think the international community and especially the region will have to find a way that they can place pressure on both sides to say, well, if you're both willing to give a little, then at least we can try and find a way to get back to the negotiating table. But until that happens, I think we're kind of going to be in this stalemate and, I don't think things are going to improve immediately.
Daniel Van Dalen, a senior analyst, Great Lakes and DRC signal risk. Thank you for talking to us here on Africa Matters. Still to come here on Africa Matters.
I am Rolling Sikama in Ghana's gold town of Obuasi, and I will be bringing you the painful stories of unemployment and underdevelopment issues in the area.
To Nigeria now, where military airstrikes meant to target various armed groups have instead left civilian casualties. Now, since 2017, about 400 civilians have been killed by accidental airstrikes, according to Lagos-based research firm SBM Intelligence. Ibrahim Shehu went to one of the affected communities in Kaduna State and brings us this report.
Over 80 people were killed in this village by an army airstrike a year ago. Instead of targeting rebels, the drone strike killed and wounded people who were attending a religious celebration. In the latest misfire, another military airstrike targeting notorious criminal gang leader mistakenly killed at least 20 civilians.
The government is yet to compensate us for our loss. They gave us some stipends, not compensation. I lost 6 of my children in the attack, 4 boys and 2 girls.
I was injured in the strike. You can see the scar under my chin. I was hospitalized for 3 months, but I'm better now. We still live with the trauma of the attack.
The Nigerian military defends its airstrikes, but acknowledges the challenges of precision targeting in complex conflict zones. They are battling a Boko Haram insurgency, armed groups who carry out mass killings and kidnap for ransom, and decades-long conflict between herders and farmers. Despite promises to investigate accidental airstrikes, few of them led to prosecutions. But last year, 2 officers were dismissed following an investigation into the drone strike in Kaduna. As communities like this mourn their dead and rebuild their lives, there's a growing call for greater accountability and improved strategies in Nigeria's counterinsurgency operations. Without these changes, the risk of alienating the very people the military seeks to protect remains high. The government-initiated road infrastructure project in Tudumburi village to build community confidence. However, residents have reported that these developments have encroached upon their farmlands.
This year we couldn't go to the farms because of the road construction. It has overtaken our farmlands. Some people have started planting already, but they were all destroyed. We were in trauma following the attacks, but this is worse. We don't have any source of livelihood.
Critics argue that the frequent civilian casualties are eroding public trust in the military, are undermining the fight against insecurity.
Where you have effective and efficient intelligence, it can differentiate between the enemy and the law-abiding citizens, so that during military operations, effort is taken not to affect the law-abiding citizens. So in all ramifications, definitely intelligence can help. Technology too can help.
In Tudumburi and other affected communities, the scars of loss run deep as the military presses on with its fights against armed groups. Ibrahim Shehu, Africa Matters, Kaduna, Nigeria.
We head to the historic gold mining town of Obuasi in southern Ghana, where the battle is not against insurgents, but over land and livelihoods. Now, the shooting of 9 small-scale miners by soldiers guarding the South African-owned Anglo-Gold Mine concession has sent shockwaves through the community. But the military insists they acted in self-defense. Rolonsika Mam has more from there.
A town in shock, grief and in mourning. residents are struggling to come to terms with the shooting of the 9 miners. Jibril hasn't seen his beloved father in days and is trying hard to connect with him via phone.
I'm not only grieving, Jibril cries day and night to take him to his father, and that's draining.
What Jibril doesn't yet know is that his father was one of the victims. The miners were killed right here. The able-bodied men walked through here up the hill as breadwinners of their families, but in the violence that followed, never made it home alive. Residents say this is the first time miners have been killed in such a manner and on such a scale in the town's history. Ibrahim Mohammed is among 14 others who survived with varying degrees of injury.
We went unarmed. The hardship is unbearable. So we want to meet and beg the mine management to release the abandoned sites for us to work. The soldiers confronted us as usual. We went on our knees, begging them to let us meet management. Unexpectedly, the soldiers became aggressive. Before we could run, they started firing. We are daring them to release the CCTV footage.
But in a press statement, the military said the soldiers acted in self-defense.
I'm not going on like that as a country, that the slightest incident of disagreements should result in shootings that lead to deaths. We don't believe that that is the way to go. And so we are interested in finding out what went wrong and how we can curb this sort of occurrence.
This incident has not scared the miners who are desperate to make a living.
No jobs, no land for farming. Mining is the only way to survive. With what has happened, now the company will have to release that abandoned site we are demanding. Else, they have to shut down or kill all of us.
The government has ordered an investigation into the killings, but the miners say they are running out of patience and cannot wait longer than 3 weeks. Growing frustrations over locals accessing abandoned mining sites have frequently led to violent confrontations. In 2023, the company allegedly blocked exit points for illegal miners underground. Temperatures are running high, and many are worried about what may happen next if urgent action is not taken to address the long-standing issues between locals and the mining company. Rollin Sikamam, Africa Matters, Obuasi, Ashanti Region, Ghana.
To Cameroon now, where a different kind of fight is seeing progress. It was the first country in the world to roll out malaria vaccines for children under 6 years of age last January. Now, nearly 140,000 children have received protection against Africa's biggest killer. Could this be the beginning of the end for malaria in the continent? Harrison Tamfu investigates and reports from the port city of Tiko.
Little Stefan Yabda received his first dose of malaria vaccine a year ago.
Since then, I've not even treated him for malaria. He has been strong until I'm scared. I'm looking at him like that, strong, no malaria, no fever.
Like Stefan, 1-year-old Chafa John was among the first children to be vaccinated in Cameroon when the world's first malaria vaccine was introduced.
He received all his full dose of the vaccine, so he's doing so well. He's not having fever frequently.
Cameroon took delivery of over 300,000 doses of RTSS, the first malaria vaccine to be approved by the WHO. Authorities say that nearly 140,000 children have been given a jab since the launch of the rollout. The country aims to reach 500,000 children with the vaccine by the end of this year. This was one of the health districts in the country where the first children were vaccinated a year ago. Medics here have kept an eye on the impact of the vaccine since then. They now say indicators are promising.
On the first people that took it was not encouraging because some of the women, they were scared about it. For now, we see that at least some of the women, they are taking it, and some of them, they are encouraging their friends. Because if you see the statistics from January till now, it's encouraging.
From January, for those that took the first dose, we had just 12. When we're moving January, February started increasing to 22. we move on, we drop again in May 19. April, we had 21. Then May, it rose up again to 33. So we are seeing that the trend was going up. While for the second dose, we had just 2 for February. Then for May, we had 17. For March, sorry, we had 17. For April, we had 21. For May, we had 25. So we are seeing the increase rate. So as time went on to this December 2024, there was a great increase. So the acceptance rate was high.
Medics say the rate of children admitted for malaria has dropped dramatically. Malaria is at epidemic levels across Africa. In Cameroon, it is responsible for 70% of deaths among children, according to the country's health ministry. Officials believe the vaccination campaign, which kicked off in 17 African countries, is a vital step forward to eradicate the disease. Experts warn that while the vaccine has brought relief in some areas, it is too early to celebrate without more long-term research. Arison Tafo, Africa Matters, Tiko, Cameroon.
Now, the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations group stage draw has revealed the opponents for the all participating countries. Host Morocco will open the tournament on December 21st against Comoros, while defending champions Ivory Coast face Cameroon. Key clashes include South Africa versus Egypt, Nigeria versus Tunisia, and Senegal versus DRC. Ivory Coast Ahmad Diallo leads their Group F campaign, while Morocco, backed by home support and stars like Ashraf Hakimi, aims to become the 4th host to win the trophy this century. Now, pugs are adored worldwide, but in South Africa, the high cost of care has led to widespread abandonment. A rescue center has taken in over 2,500 of these dogs since 2008, highlighting a growing challenge in caring for them, as Grace Kuria-Kanja reports.
Their short, muzzled face and a tightly curled tail make them a big hit. But they are anything but low maintenance for pet owners.
I think the biggest problem with people, they don't realize how pugs need veterinary care. They're quite expensive to look after pugs. But people, they don't realize that they see cuteness on the pugs and then they just rush to get a pug, and then they can't manage to look after the pugs because they really have high vet bills.
This center in Ekhuruleni, Gauteng province, is home to more than 200 pugs. There are 2 other foster homes in Cape Town and Johannesburg. It was founded by Cheryl Go, who traveled across the country rescuing an increasing number of pugs.
So there are more and more pugs needing assistance in these past few years because we have a major exit of people that are immigrating to various countries. At one stage, there was a ban on flying any flat-faced dogs, and right now it is very, very expensive to get your animals overseas. And a lot of the overseas countries also don't allow animals when you rent a property.
Caregivers here say that these pugs are often susceptible to health issues, ranging from breathing to eye problems and leg paralysis. And medical expenses alone cost the center close to $38,000 every year, even though it has a veterinary clinic on site.
Some arrive here in very, very bad condition. We've just recently had one that came in here that had a lot of old bite wounds and had a leg that we had to amputate. So that's just one of the many conditions. We had another one that came in here that was so flea infested that he had hair loss. So sometimes they do come in here in very, very bad conditions.
Caregivers are urging enthusiasts to research pug dog ownership so that they can have a long-term commitment to these loyal companions. Grace Kuria-Kanja, Africa Matters.
And that's our show this week. Share your thoughts and suggestions about the stories you'd like to see on this episode, or ideas on what you'd like us to cover on YouTube or on X using the hashtag Africa Matters. Thanks for watching, and it's goodbye from me, Brenda Radido.